Welcome to another episode of Notable Perspectives. I'm your host, Dr. Muthu Alagappan, and today we're really excited to be joined by Dr. Pat Cawley. Dr. Cawley is the CEO of MUSC Health and Vice President for Health Affairs at the Medical University of South Carolina. Under his leadership, MUSC has expanded its clinical enterprises by building a new children's hospital, establishing multiple ambulatory sites, developing additional clinical affiliates, and developing numerous novel joint ventures. MUSC has also become a leader in telehealth. In 2022, MUSC was recognized by U.S. News and World Report as the #1 hospital in South Carolina for the 8th consecutive year. Dr. Pat Cawley has led MUSC's improvement in transformation and quality and patient safety, having won numerous awards in this area, including the University Health System Consortium's Rising Star Award in 2012 for exemplary performance in patient safety, mortality, clinical effectiveness, and equity of care. Pat, thank you so much for joining us today.
Muthu, glad to be here.
So I want to jump right in and actually start at the beginning of your medical career. What drew you into healthcare and specifically into the field of becoming a physician?
Well, a long time ago, my father was a doctor, and he had his own practice. I was always interested in that to some degree. And, late in high school, I decided I would try the pre-med thing. But at the same time, believe it or not, I was also interested in the business side of his practice. And when I went to college at the place called the University of Scranton, I was both a undergrad biology major and a business major. So I had two majors and sort of dichotomous, but that's kind of who I was at the time. And in some ways, exactly who I remain today.
That's fascinating. You were sort of ahead of your time in some ways, because now I think it's actually a lot more common that medical students come into medical school with a background in anthropology or computer science or business. In your case, are you also noticing that more medical students at MUSC have these sort of dual backgrounds? And what are your thoughts on the overall trend of physicians having a dual interest that, they may not have had 20 or 30 years ago?
Well, I think it's fascinating. I wish it had been a little easier for me. This is back in the late 80s. I really had to search out a medical school that would take me, that would also let me get an MBA at the same time. And that was a little tough at the time. I mean, that doesn't matter. You can go to any medical school today, and you can easily do that. So I applaud it. I like how things have changed. The more physicians that we have in business, the more that we have in sort of these dual areas is good for the physician. It extends, I think, their career, gets them interested in exactly what they want to be interested in. And I think it's good for medicine, and I think it's good for the business of medicine to have these docs that have training and they're ready to step into these, these roles that are a little bit different than a pure physician role.
When I joined Notable, I was the first physician at the company, and many companies now in the healthcare technology space have physicians who are full-time employees, helping advise and guide on product decisions. Do you think physicians need more of a seat at the table when it comes to building and designing healthcare technology?
Oh, man, come on. I'm going to say absolutely. So, yes, physicians need to be there more often. I think that's what's been missing over the last 20 years. And it's why you're seeing a little bit of burnout problem related to the use of technology is that, we just haven't had enough physicians at the table to help design healthcare, basically. Physicians are in a very unique circumstance. We're taught early on, as you know, to engage with patients. We probably know patients much better than any other provider. We spend a long time training. We get to know people. Yet somehow we skipped over involving physicians for almost 2 decades. I would say in the last 5 years, we've definitely involving physicians more. And you got to get them at the ground level. You got to get them, when you're just talking about systems, how would you design this rather than build something and see how the docs like it? I mean that's the old way of doing it. And you got feedback, but you already built something, that maybe already made significant design capitulations. So I absolutely. At the same time, just inviting docs in is not the way to go. I mean, docs have to have the right training. They have to be able to balance the competing demands of both the business, the development side, the rush to get a minimally viable product out. I mean, all these things need to be balanced. Sometimes physicians who haven't had this kind of training, they only push the quality side, and that is insufficient in today's business environment. You really have to have that balance of multiple competing priorities.
I think that's a great point, and that's where we've seen these cross-functional teams be so valuable, is you can have a new physician who indexes towards the quality improvement, downside protection, patient safety angle, but then pair them with someone who's more out of industry and has a design thinking and more visionary can-do attitude.
I mean, it's definitely occurred. I would say the last 10 years within health systems themselves, I think there's been a significant trend toward physician involvement in leadership at medium and bigger sized health systems. I still find a hospital here and a hospital there that has never had a physician in the senior leadership. You would see that regularly more than 10 years ago, but it's a little bit unusual now. But if you've been small and you've not been able to afford that, I think it still exists. But I think it very, very quickly that has gone by the wayside. What you're tending to see now, as opposed to 10 years ago, you might have had one doc in senior leadership. Now you have different kind of phenotypes. You have physicians that might lean toward the quality side. You have physicians that might lean toward the innovation side. You might have somebody that leans more toward technology, particularly information technology. So I think we're starting to see multiple physicians, which I think is just the natural evolution of what occurs over time. Those initial physicians mentor physicians coming up. One's coming up, maybe don't want to toe the same road, so they try something a little bit different. And it's all good. It's all headed in the right direction. But you just can't stop yet. I don't think we still need to be purposeful and make sure that we're trying to lead physicians into these roles. I work on this constantly. In fact, this past summer, a really good example, we had the need for a physician, a major physician role in IT development. And I got heavily involved in recruiting our CMIO, which we ended up taking internally from someone internally after going external. But, I knew we had different people that could take this role. We just had to look at them a little bit differently. And I think we found a fantastic internal CMIO candidate who, maybe wasn't the traditional route, but she's going to be great.
I want to switch gears a bit and talk about quality improvement. As a hospitalist and leader in quality improvement, I'm sure this is very close to your heart, and you've been a leader in this space for a long time. In my mind, quality improvement has traditionally been about how do we improve processes to prevent and reduce patient safety errors. You think of things like the checklist manifesto or improving handoffs. Are you seeing more of a role for technology to improve patient safety and quality, in addition to the process changes we've leaned on for a long time?
Absolutely. I think one of the things that we're starting to see more and more, and we're talking about it here. In fact, how do you use technology to change the business? We've been, I have this list of things. People used to ask me, what do I worry about? And I keep this running list. About every couple of years, I might change something on the list. 2 years ago, I actually added to the list digital transformation. And the reason I added digital transformation to the list was because I didn't see us grabbing certain technologies to solve, to me, what are everyday problems. And I know that technology exists, but I just need somebody to look at that technology, look at that problem, and then marry those two up and transform the way we do things. So I don't think we're doing enough of it. And we're trying to be much, much more purposeful here at MUSC. We actually have a new senior leader coming who's going to focus on digital transformation. And her role is going to be connecting with business leaders, physician leaders, nursing leaders, figuring out the problems of day to day and what technology can be used to solve that. There have been phenomenal technology advances in the past 10 years in healthcare. We use a lot of them, but I still have this feeling we're not using enough of them, mainly because we're trying to fix problems in the same old way through the same old checklist, rather than using AI or some advanced sensor that we might be able to put somewhere in order to answer some of these, really basic but recurring problems.
As you mentioned, there's probably countless ways that you could use technology in a more intelligent way to supervise and catch errors before they proliferate, whether that's identifying C. diff hotspots in the hospital or identifying when a patient's IV is due to be changed. Anytime I think about technology innovation at a health system, I'm reminded of an article that I believe Sachin Jain wrote in Forbes, where he called it, I think, Death by Pilot. And he tells the story of being a medical student at Harvard and having an idea for a process improvement project where he was going to do something fairly minor, like give notepads to patients to write down their questions before morning rounds. And in the article, he writes that he would have to go to one committee and they would approve it, but they would simply send him to another committee for another approval. And he'd eventually been to so many committees that he eventually just gave up on the project altogether. And it was this pilot fatigue that I think is a real phenomenon. Do you think this idea of too many committees and death by pilot as being an overstated criticism of the way technology innovation is in healthcare today, or is this more of the reality?
I think that can happen. I'm sort of as he's saying that I not quite that one. I think that seems a little funny that a relatively low-tech solution needed a lot of approval, but I can see it happening in certain systems. I'm very sensitive to that. When physician leaders or even non-physician leaders say to me, I've been trying to work this through the system for the last 6 months, that's a problem. And I hear that and I'll dig into that and try to find out what's going on. Senior leaders need to be on the lookout for that kind of thing. And if you are putting them through too many committees, it's a problem. There's no doubt about it. At the same time, you want to make sure that it's done well. It hits the right committees. We constantly tweak that here. And in fact, we've had a process we probably put in place around 5 years ago for new projects. And there was a way to go to senior leaders first. And then there was a strategy group, then through a finance group, and then through several subgroups just to get your financial component approved, hiring the doctors approved, hiring the nurses approved. And, I heard that this was getting a little laborious a few months ago. And, we actually instantly took a look at this, cut out a few steps, made it easier to go somewhere. So, there's two sides to that, but I could easily see, a too short side and a too long side. Got to find right down the middle, just right.
It's interesting because I think big tech has traditionally taken the opposite approach of how do we move really quickly? But we've also seen that many of the moonshot healthcare projects from big technology companies like Google haven't turned out the way, that they were intended to, or sort of haven't lived up to their promise. Along those lines, we're seeing that mergers and acquisitions are picking up pace in healthcare. Amazon and One Medical and many others recently as well. How worried are you, and what do you think of these new entrants to healthcare from big technology companies? Is this something we should be excited about or fearful of or something in between?
I'm neither excited about it nor fearful of it. It just is what it is. There is consolidation occurring. It's occurring for economic reasons, and it's going to occur. It's happened across multiple industries, and the real question is, how small can you be and still do all the cutting edge and innovative things that you want to do? I don't know what that number is. It's probably somewhere, in the 3 to 4 billion range at minimum. But you can get too big as well. I mean, you can get up on that curve, as we all know. The Starling curve. There's no point in getting higher because there's no greater advantage to it. So it's going to happen. Just accept it and work it through. We've had a lot of growth in our system. We've grown from about 8,000 care team members. We're up over 25 care team members. We went from 3 hospitals. We have 14 hospitals at this point. We're at a pretty good place. How do I know that? Well, we can afford to do certain things that we might have to think twice about 5 or 7 years ago. I'm also able to recruit better because of that. So, that's just how I generally measure it. We'll see if that holds up over time. But I'm excited about it. We've been able to do a lot of different things that we would never have been able to do. Like I wouldn't have been able to hire a full-time chief digital transformation leader. That is just not something I would have been able to afford 5 or 6 years ago when we were a lot smaller. I got a chief supply chain officer that is fantastic. And I wouldn't have been able to afford him 5 years ago. So, big is not necessarily bad. Just got to find that sweet spot.
When you think about some of these new tech entrants into healthcare, the Amazons of the world, it seems like they're mostly coming after the care delivery arm of healthcare. But academic medical centers, of course, have this triple mission of clinical care, but also education and research. Do you see these education and research arms of AMCs being sort of a stronghold or core competencies that these new entrants will never go after?
Well, I think if you want to work with us, you have to go after all 3 elements of our tripartite mission. That's our mission. It's also, and we say this every day, it's also our competitive advantage. Having teaching and research as part of our clinical portfolio, it makes us who we are. So we look at partners who want to help tackle all 3 of those, not just somebody who just wants to do the clinical side. In fact, we'll very, very quickly, we'll look at somebody, but, we'll look past them if all they're interested in is the clinical arm. That's great. And, but, we're really looking for like-minded partners. I cannot abandon the research side. I cannot abandon the education side of who we are. And so I need partners that want to link up on all 3. And you look across 90% of the partnerships that live on, that keep on going, are really working with us across at least 2 of those robustly, and 3 if possible.
That's really interesting, and I love the conviction there. I want to go a little bit deeper on that. But before we jump to that, I do want to spend some time thinking about the issues that probably often cross your desk as the CEO of the system. One, which has to be top of mind, is around labor shortages, both on the clinician and administrative staff side. I think it was a recent report forecasting a national labor shortage of 450,000 nurses over the next 5 years or so, and probably on the order of 80,000 physicians by 2025. How worried should we be about this? And is this as dire as it seems from the data?
Well, Muthu, you're a little younger than me. I'm worried about it. I'm going to need care in the next 2 decades. Yeah, we should be worried about it. This was not a problem before. This was a problem before the pandemic. We just didn't talk about it as much. Burnout was a problem prior to the pandemic. Needing to change the way providers work, particularly nurses, just their daily work, how they approach things. In a lot of ways, some stuff hasn't changed in 3 decades. And, the pandemic comes along and we double down on the same way we were doing things before. I'm not surprised that we've had, the bigger labor shortages we've had because of that. We must change the way we deliver care. And we got to get into that. What do the nurses do every day? We have to use nursing. We have to use doctors. We have to use advanced practice providers for the things that only they can do. RNs are so important in recognizing, medication problems. They're the front line. And sometimes we don't make that the number one thing they do. They do other things that nursing assistants can do. So we really have to stop doing this. This gets back to the conversation we had a little bit earlier. A lot of this we could do with technology. A lot of it is we just need to have the willpower to go ahead and change. It's tough stuff, though, because we get so locked up in the way of the past. When I was a younger hospitalist, I used to, there was this big debate about how many patients a hospitalist could see. And, very early in the 90s, you got into this 10 to 15 patients per day could be rounded on. And it's almost become dogma in some ways, but that's not what I experienced. I experienced it really depended on the hospital. I'd worked probably in about 30 different hospitals in my career to one degree or the other. There's one VA, which was very, very, very inefficient, which, I would struggle to see more than 8 patients a day, right? But then there was another hospital I worked in, seeing 30 was no problem. So the systems were built differently. The hospital that was the 30 was very different hospital than that VA that I worked in, right? And even all VAs are not even the same. And that, I'd worked in that VA, I could see 8. I knew another VA I could work in, I could see 12 to 15 without a problem, right? It's the same thing for nursing. We have to figure out how we optimize the things that only our physicians, nurses, and other providers can do and take the other stuff away from them. Use technology to replace a lot of it. But we got to be purposeful about it. And this is, you're hitting on the challenge of the next 10 years. If we don't solve that, we're going to have such labor problems that what we see today is going to be nothing compared to what happens in 10 years as the population ages, as there are more people needing health care, and burnout has continued. People leave early, and now you got a severe problem. It's a real problem today. This could get worse if we don't approach it right.
Is automation, inevitable in that case? You think about shifting work to lower cost resources, right? Moving work to administrative staff or to other staff that can perform the work instead of your physicians or nurses. Ultimately, that sort of arbitrage concludes in shifting work onto machines who can do the work for a fraction of the cost. Is that how you see this playing out in the next 5 or 10 years, that a lot of the work in health systems that is currently manual becomes automated?
Absolutely. We have to keep people working at the very, very top of their license, and don't just push it all on nursing assistants or physician's assistants or advanced practice providers. Inevitably it gets shifted down. I'm a firm believer in technology. That's why here at MUSC, we're hiring this chief digital transformation officer. I think there's a lot of technology out there today. We just don't use enough of it. And we don't use enough of it because leaders get caught in this paradigm of delivering care the way they see it today. And they don't look honestly they don't understand the technology. This is the big part of what I find. They really don't understand the technology. They don't understand AI. They don't understand the Internet of Things and how you could put a sensor just about anywhere anymore. When you begin to really, really understand that and seek to change the way you do things today, that's when the magic happens. And we need, you can bring technology experts to the physician, but until the physician leader, the clinical leader begins to say, hey, we can do this differently, that's when it's going to change faster.
When you think about bringing technology to the health system, there's probably two ways you could do that. You could build from within, hire the technologists, the engineers, the product managers, and start to build that core competency from within the system. Or you could partner with companies who specialize in this externally. Is there a framework you use or a heuristic when deciding when to partner versus when to build out internally?
That's a great question. When do you partner? When do you not? If we don't have the expertise and we're getting stuck, and I can't get the team outside the old way of thinking. I'm going to start to lean to partnership. If I have a team, though, that's very cutting edge, that wants to try new things, that they're always doing something a little different, I may give that team a lot of space and some resources to run. It highly depends. I've seen just different circumstances where it's not necessarily the technology. Is that leader, is that team, ready to do things different? And I'll team up with a well-matched partner. Boy, is powerful. Somebody that has similar mission, vision, values. That is just fantastic to see. We have, about 5 or 6 years ago at MUSC, we just started to say to ourselves, you know what? Partnership is the better way to go. We were all about, we had to own everything. We had to do everything ourselves. And we had a mindset change amongst our board, our senior leadership, and we went to partnership, and it's just a much better way to go. Now, that doesn't mean we partner for everything. There are times, like I said, there are teams, our telehealth team is fantastic and very innovative, willing to try, okay to fail. We give them a lot of base resources to develop things. So it depends. I know that's a non-answer.
No, that makes sense. And this was sort of eye-opening for me when I joined Notable. It's just seeing the level of specialization and expertise that people in fields like design and engineering and platform architecture have. You go to an emergency room and someone gets a cut on their face and you call the plastic surgeon because they're the experts in repairing that. They've spent, decades practicing and perfecting that craft. And when I got to Notable, I had that same sort of epiphany that there are people that are equally skilled that have devoted their life to designing products that people want to use. And there's true expertise in that. And as you said, finding partners with that expertise is extremely valuable.
That's great question. I don't look at everything. I can't. And I shouldn't. Every leader should be involved in their own search for that digital transformation. I try to focus on the big pieces, the big things that we're focused on in terms of goals across our academic health system. And that's where I might get involved. Like, digital front door a couple of years ago, was a big push for us. I got involved in that one. I might also get involved in things that are very, very cutting edge that, just need a little bit of, push getting started. Certain kind of biologic therapies that have a technology component to it. These things might have there might be some hesitancy and this is the kind of thing that I might get involved in. There's just dozens and dozens and dozens of opportunities. I probably meet with, half a dozen companies on a monthly basis that are probably new to me in some way. And there's always follow up with previous, and they're all a little different. Things like we have a very, very big partnership with Siemens. I'm heavily involved in that. But we have some smaller partnerships with others that, I might have gotten involved at one point. How do we know a partner works? I'm telling you, right from the beginning, it's mission, vision, values. I can sit I get to the point now I can sit with a company in about half hour. I can just tell whether it's going to go well or not. And that's if we have alignment on mission, vision, values. And we don't need to match completely, but at least be in the same, same relative area. And sometimes you try to force it. And I thought, I'm going to be wrong here. I still think there's something here. And I swear, I always write myself a little note now at the beginning, and almost always you can pick it out at the beginning. So, there's a lot of vaporware out there, a lot of vaporware. Although you get better and better at picking that up over time. I don't need to have an MVP at all times, but I'd like it to be pretty close to be able to see what you got. So it's a process. We have a full-time office also that helps with industry partners. That helps make sure we stay on target. For those partners that we have chosen to work with, we have a joint operating council over all of them to some degree. Some joint operating councils are bigger than others, but we find that forcing some meetings, it doesn't have to be every month, some are every quarter, where we talk about what are the things we're working on, what's working, what's not working. Do we need to change? Environment changes. Do we need to change what we're doing? So, those are some things I look at.
I was going to ask you, what lessons would you have for other health systems as they're starting to embark on these partnerships? And I think you just gave us one, which is the joint operating councils as a way to form alignment and steer. Are there others that you would share in terms of lessons you've learned?
I mean, the very, very, very first tip I would give is get over yourself. Partnership is better than doing it by yourself. And a lot of health systems, they got to do everything by themselves. And then we were probably there to some degree 7 or 8 years ago, but that's not how we act anymore. And because of that, we're able to act faster, better. It's a little messier. It's a little harder to manage. I spend a lot of my time on joint operating committees or subsidiary boards. And I mean, just too numerous to count, but it's definitely gets you a better product in the end. Definitely gets you a better product.
I can see the wisdom from your business and medical backgrounds coming together as you talk through that. Well, your time is precious, so maybe we'll just have one final question, which is, what is the one thing that gives you the most optimism for the future of healthcare in this country as you look forward?
Well, first, I'm an extremely optimistic person. I always have been, and so it's easy for me to find good things happening in healthcare. I would choose healthcare and be a doctor again in an instant. I don't even hesitate at that. My optimism is the tremendous innovation that I see in healthcare, and I've seen it over almost 30 years at this point. And it's amazing what we do. And sometimes you get some dark years where things seem to be moving so slow. But all of a sudden, then it speeds up faster than you would have ever thought. So I think we have untapped ability to be innovative and try to help patients and families, and that is always going to win out in the end.
That's a great note to end on. Dr. Cawley, thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate your time and the conversation.
Oh, Muthu, it was great to see you, and I really enjoyed the conversation. Appreciate it.